Captain Jake Morrison watched the stars through the bridge window of the UES horizon as his ship moved through space at faster than light speed. This was humanity's first journey beyond their solar system, and Jake felt proud to be leading it. His crew of 25 humans had been chosen from Earth's best pilots and scientists. They had been traveling for 3 weeks when the ship's sensors picked up something strange. "Captain, we have a distress signal coming from the next star system," said Lieutenant Ben Carter from his station. "It appears to be an alien vessel under attack." Jake's heart raced. This would be humanity's first contact with alien life. "Set course for the signal. All crew to battle stations." The horizon dropped out of faster-than-light travel near a massive alien ship that looked like nothing humans had ever built. It was beautiful with smooth curves and bright lights, but it was clearly damaged. 3 smaller ships were attacking it with energy weapons that lit up the darkness of space. "The attacking ships don't match any design in our databases," reported Dr. Helen Brooks from the science station. "But the larger ship is sending out universal peace symbols along with their distress call." Jake made his decision quickly. "Load all weapons. We're going to help them." The human ship moved fast toward the battle. The attacking ships were so focused on their target that they didn't notice the horizon until it was too late. Jake's crew opened fire with railguns and missile systems that had been designed for asteroid mining, but worked perfectly as weapons. The first attacking ship exploded in a bright flash when 3 missiles hit its engine section. The second ship tried to turn and fight, but human weapons tore through its hull like paper. The third ship attempted to run, but Ben Carter tracked it with targeting computers and destroyed it with a single precise shot. In less than 5 minutes, the battle was over. The alien rescue ship had succeeded, but the crew of the damaged vessel couldn't believe what they had just seen. Admiral Vexathon of the Valdari Empire stood on the bridge of the science vessel Peaceful Dawn and stared at the human ship through his viewing screen. He had lived for 200 years and commanded fleets across the galaxy, but he had never seen anything like what these creatures had just done. "They destroyed 3 raider ships in less than 5 minutes, whispered his aide. "How is that possible?" Vexthon didn't answer. He had watched the human ship move with deadly purpose and strike without hesitation. There was no fear in their actions, and no mercy for their enemies. When the raiders tried to surrender, the humans kept firing until every ship was destroyed. "Sir, the human vessel is trying to communicate with us," reported the communications officer. "Put them through," Vexthon said. The screen showed a human male with short brown hair and determined eyes. He wore a simple blue uniform and spoke in a calm voice. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the Earthship Horizon. We received your distress call and came to help. Are you injured?" Vexthon found his voice. "I am Admiral Vexthon of the Valdari Empire. We are grateful for your assistance, but we must ask who you are and where you come from." "We're humans from the planet Earth," Jake replied. "This is our first time traveling beyond our home system. We couldn't just watch while someone was being attacked." The Valdari Admiral felt a chill run through his body. These creatures had traveled across space in a primitive ship and fought a battle that his own trained warriors might have struggled with. They had shown tactical skills that impressed him and ruthlessness that terrified him. Over the next few hours, Jake and his crew worked with the Valdari to repair their damaged ship. The humans shared their technology freely and asked many questions about the galaxy. They seemed curious about everything and eager to learn, but Vexthon noticed other things too. When the humans worked, they moved with military precision. Their ship was designed for war, even though they called it a science vessel. Every human carried weapons, and they watched the corridors like soldiers expecting an attack. "Tell me, Captain Morrison," Vexthon said during a break in the repairs, "how long has your species been spacefaring?" "This is actually our first interstellar mission," Jake answered honestly. "We've only had faster-than-light travel for 2 years. Vexthon couldn't hide his shock. A species that had just learned to travel between stars had built warships and fought with the skill of veterans. What would they become with time and experience? When the repairs were finished, Jake offered to escort the Valdari ship back to their territory. Vexthon accepted, but he was already planning his report to the High Council. During the journey, he observed the humans more closely and what he saw worried him. The human crew trained constantly for combat. They ran battle drills every day and practiced with weapons during their free time. They talked about their wars on Earth and the enemies they had fought. These creatures lived for conflict in a way that no civilized species should. When they reached Valdari space, Vestan thanked Jake for his help and watched the human ship disappear into faster-than-light travel. Then he sent an urgent message to the capital world. High Counselor Zephyri read Vestan's report 3 times before calling an emergency session of the ruling council. The Valdari Empire had maintained peace across 800 star systems for 5 centuries. They had achieved this through careful diplomacy and the threat of superior technology. Now a new species had appeared that might upset that balance. "These humans are too dangerous to be allowed into galactic society," Zephyri announced to the assembled counselors. "They solve problems with violence and they're good at it. If we allow them to spread across the galaxy, they will bring war wherever they go." The debate lasted for days, but the decision was unanimous. The Valdari Empire would enforce a complete quarantine around human space. No human ship would be allowed to leave their solar system, and no alien vessel would be permitted to make contact with them. Construction of the quarantine barrier began immediately. Massive defense platforms were built at the edge of human space, equipped with weapons that could destroy any ship trying to pass. The message was broadcast across the galaxy that Earth and its people were forbidden territory. Jake Morrison never learned about the quarantine until it was too late. When the next human ships tried to leave Earth's solar system, they found alien warships waiting for them. Any attempt to cross the invisible line resulted in warning shots and eventually destruction. Humanity had made first contact by saving alien lives, but they were judged too dangerous to be free. The galaxy had decided that humans belonged in a cage and the Valdari Empire held the key. Dr. Alex Chen stood in the underground laboratory beneath the Colorado mountains and stared at the holographic display showing Earth's solar system. Red markers indicated the positions of alien defense platforms that had surrounded human space for 20 years. The quarantine was complete and perfect. "Any luck breaking their communication codes?" asked General Nick Stone as he entered the lab. Alex shook his head. "The Valdari use quantum encryption that changes every few seconds. We can detect their signals, but we can't read them." Nick walked to the display and studied the enemy positions. As head of Earth's military forces, he had spent 2 decades preparing for the day when humanity would break free from their cage. The quarantine had been a shock, but it had also been a gift. Cut off from alien technology, humans had been forced to develop their own solutions. "Show me the latest progress reports," Nick said. Alex touched controls, and the display changed to show technical diagrams. "Project Prometheus is ahead of schedule. We've developed fusion drives that are twice as fast as anything we had before. Our new AI systems can process battle data in real time. The quantum computers can crack most encryption in minutes." "What about weapons?" "That's where we've made the biggest advances. The railguns can punch through any known armor. The plasma cannons use contained nuclear fusion. We've even developed gravity bombs that can crush a ship from the inside." Nick smiled grimly. 20 years of forced isolation had turned humanity into something the galaxy had never seen. They had taken their natural talent for war and refined it with desperate innovation. In another part of the world, Kate Williams prepared for her most dangerous mission yet. As head of the Secret Breach Protocol program, she had been sneaking past the quarantine for 5 years. Her ship was built with stealth technology that the aliens couldn't detect. "Remember, Kate, you can observe but don't engage," said her mission commander over the radio. "We need information, not a war." Kate's ship, the Shadow, slipped past the alien sensors like a ghost. She had learned to fly through the gaps in their patrol routes and hide in the radiation shadows of asteroids. Tonight she was going deeper into alien space than any human had traveled since the quarantine began. What she found in the outer systems shocked her. The Valdari Empire was huge beyond imagination. Thousands of worlds with billions of people living in perfect peace. Their cities were beautiful and their technology was advanced, but Kate noticed something that worried her. There were no military exercises. The Valdari fleets moved in predictable patterns, and their ships were designed for show rather than battle. After 40 years of peace, they had forgotten how to fight. But Kate discovered something else during her reconnaissance missions. The galaxy was not empty beyond Valdari space. Her sensors detected massive structures moving in the darkness between stars. Something was coming from outside the galaxy, and it was bigger than anything the Valdari had ever faced. Meanwhile, in Valdari territory, young Sub-Commander Ralek stood watch on a border station and wondered about the quarantined humans. He had read the old reports about their rescue of Admiral Vestan and their skill in battle. The official story was that humans were dangerous savages who brought war wherever they went. But Ralek had also studied the tactical records of that first battle. The humans had fought with precision and intelligence. They had saved Valdari lives and asked for nothing in return. How could such beings be truly evil? His concerns grew when his sensors began detecting strange signals from beyond the galaxy's edge. Unknown ships were probing the outer systems, but when he reported this to his superiors, they dismissed his warnings. The Empire has maintained peace for centuries, High Arbiter Gormalik told him during a communication. There are no threats that our diplomacy cannot handle. Ralek wanted to argue, but he held his tongue. The Valdari leadership had become so confident in their superiority that they couldn't imagine anyone challenging them. Back on Earth, Alex Chen made a breakthrough that changed everything. His team had been studying fragments of alien technology recovered from the original battle, and they finally understood how Valdari energy shields worked. The shields are incredibly advanced, but they have a fatal flaw, Alex explained to a gathering of human leaders. They're designed to stop known weapons using predictable energy patterns. Our new quantum disruptors operate on frequencies that don't exist in Valdari databases. General Nick Stone leaned forward. You're saying we can punch through their defenses? Not just punch through them. We can turn their own shields into weapons against them. The breakthrough led to rapid development of new technologies. Human engineers designed ships that could appear invisible to Valdari sensors, weapons that could adapt to any defense, computer systems that learned from each battle and became stronger. Kate Williams brought back more disturbing news from her latest mission. The alien structures she had detected were now clearly artificial. Massive ships the size of moons were moving toward the galaxy, and they were accelerating. Whatever's coming, it's not friendly, she reported to the secret council that governed Earth's defense. The energy signatures don't match anything in Valdari space. This is something from outside the galaxy entirely. Dr. Helen Brooks analyzed. Kate's data and her conclusions were terrifying. These ships use biological technology. They're not just machines, they're alive, and they're headed straight for the center of the galaxy. The human leaders faced an impossible choice. They could break the quarantine and warn the Valdari about the approaching threat, but that would mean revealing their illegal reconnaissance missions, or they could stay hidden and let the aliens face the danger alone. The Valdari made their choice when they caged us, Nick Stone said during the debate. If they're too proud to accept our help, then they'll have to face the consequences. But not everyone agreed. Admiral Lisa Grant had been Jake Morrison's second-in-command during first contact, and she remembered the Valdari they had saved. Those were good people who needed help, she argued. If we let them be destroyed without warning, we're no better than the monsters they think we are. The debate continued for weeks, while the alien fleet drew closer. Finally, they reached a compromise. They would prepare to break the quarantine if the Valdari proved unable to handle the threat themselves. Until then, they would watch and wait. In his laboratory, Alex Chen worked day and night to complete humanity's secret weapons. Every day brought new innovations born from desperation and determination. Humans had always been good at solving problems, but 40 years of isolation had made them brilliant at it. The quarantine had been meant to contain a dangerous species. Instead, it had created something the galaxy had never seen before. Humans cut off from alien influence had developed their own unique approach to technology and warfare. When the alien invaders finally arrived, they would face not the primitive species that the Valdari remembered, but something far more dangerous. Humanity had spent 4 decades preparing for this moment, and they were ready for war. Fleet Admiral Vestan of the Valdari Empire stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched in horror. as the outer colony of Kthmore 7 died before his eyes. The alien invaders had arrived without warning 3 weeks ago, and nothing the Valdari military tried could stop them. The enemy ships were unlike anything in Valdari databases. They moved like living creatures and seemed to adapt to every weapon fired at them. When the Valdari used energy beams, the alien ships grew thicker armor. When they fired kinetic weapons, the creatures developed shields that absorbed the impact. "Sir, we're receiving evacuation requests from Kthmore 6, reported his communications officer. "The alien fleet is moving toward the inner planets." Vestan felt sick. In 3 weeks of fighting, the Valdari had lost 12 colonies and 47 warships. The enemy casualties were 0. Every battle ended the same way, with Valdari ships being torn apart by creatures that learned from each encounter. The aliens called themselves the Kthmore Swarm, and they had come from beyond the galaxy seeking new worlds to consume. Their technology was biological rather than mechanical, and it evolved during combat. Facing them was like fighting an enemy that became stronger with every shot fired at it. On Earth, Admiral Roy Carter watched the alien invasion through long-range sensors and felt a mixture of anger and sadness. The Valdari were being slaughtered because they had never learned to adapt. Their military doctrine hadn't changed in centuries, and they had no experience fighting an enemy that could evolve. "We could end this in a month," said Major Sam Rodriguez during a strategy meeting. "Our quantum disruptors would tear through their biological armor, and our adaptive AI could counter their evolution." Roy nodded, but he knew the politics were more complicated than the tactics. Earth's government was still debating whether to break the quarantine and offer help. Many humans felt that the Valdari deserved what was happening to them. Dr. Helen Brooks had been studying the Kthmore through intercepted battle recordings, and her analysis was both fascinating and terrifying. "They're not just individual ships," she explained to the Earth Defense Council. "The entire swarm operates as a single mind. Each ship shares information instantly with all the others. That's why they adapt so quickly," added Alex Chen. "When one ship learns to defend against a weapon, every ship in the fleet gains that knowledge immediately." General Nick Stone studied the tactical displays and shook his head. "The Valdari are fighting them like separate battles, but it's really one massive organism. Every engagement makes the enemy stronger." Back in Valdari space, Prime Counselor Kthmore faced the worst crisis in his empire's history. Half the outer colonies were gone, and refugees were flooding the inner systems. The military was demanding reinforcements, but he had no ships left to send. "What about the humans?" asked his military advisor during an emergency council meeting. "Our intelligence reports suggest they have advanced technology." Kthmore's expression hardened. "The quarantine exists for good reasons. Humans are violent and unpredictable. If we let them loose in the galaxy, they might be worse than the invaders. But sir, our current forces are insufficient to stop the Kthmore advance. Then we will develop new weapons and tactics. The Valdari Empire has survived for 1,000 years without human help. We will not compromise our principles now." The counselor's pride was shared throughout the Valdari military. They had convinced themselves that their failures were due to insufficient resources rather than flawed thinking. The idea that primitive humans might succeed where they had failed was unacceptable. Meanwhile, Sam Rodriguez was tired of waiting for politicians to make decisions. He had been running unauthorized rescue missions into Valdari space for weeks, saving civilians from overrun colonies. His stealth ships could slip past both Valdari and Kthmore forces to evacuate refugees. During his latest mission to the colony world of Veltara, Sam saw the true horror of the invasion. The Kthmore didn't just conquer worlds, they consumed them. Their biological ships fed on the planet's resources and grew larger. Dead worlds were left behind, stripped of all life. "This isn't conquest, it's feeding," Sam reported back to Earth. "The Kthmore are like a plague of locusts moving from world to world. If they reach the core systems, billions will die." His words finally convinced Earth's leaders to act. Roy Carter was given permission to offer military assistance to the Valdari Empire. The message was sent through diplomatic channels with an offer to end the quarantine and fight together against the common enemy. Kthmore's response was swift and dismissive. "The Valdari Empire does not require assistance from quarantined primitives. We will handle this threat using proper civilized methods. Roy Carter wasn't surprised by the rejection, but he was frustrated. Human forces could stop the Kthmore advance, but Valdari pride was more important to them than survival. The situation became desperate when the Kthmore fleet reached the middle colonies. Valdari resistance collapsed as their predictable tactics failed again and again. The aliens had learned to counter every weapon and strategy in the Valdari military manual. Helen Brooks made a crucial discovery while analyzing Kthmore biology from captured specimens. Their evolution isn't random, she announced. They adapt based on predictable patterns. If we could introduce something completely outside their experience, they might not be able to counter it fast enough. What kind of something? Asked Alex. Human technology. Our development was completely isolated from galactic civilization. The Kthmore have adapted to counter everything in Valdari databases, but they've never encountered our weapons. The breakthrough came at the worst possible time. The Kthmore had broken through the middle defensive line and were approaching the core systems. Valdari military command was in chaos, and refugee ships clogged the space lanes. Sub-Commander Ralek watched the disaster unfold from his border station and finally understood the truth. The Valdari Empire was dying because of its own arrogance. They had rejected human help, and now they were paying the price. When acting Councillor Velnara took power after Kurthane's ship was destroyed, she faced an impossible situation. The Valdari military was shattered, and the Kthmore were 3 days away from the capital world. Send a message to Earth, she ordered her communications officer. Tell them we accept their offer of assistance. But by then it might be too late. The Kthmore had consumed 20 Valdari colonies, and their swarm had grown massive. Even with human help, stopping them would require a miracle. Roy Carter received the Valdari surrender message and immediately began preparations for Operation Breakout. Human ships that had been hidden for 40 years were finally revealed. The quarantine that had imprisoned humanity was about to become their launching point for the greatest battle in galactic history. The Valdari Empire had lost everything to their pride, but humanity was about to show them what they had rejected. The forbidden species was coming to save the galaxy, whether the aliens wanted it or not. Fleet Admiral Ben Taylor stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance and watched the Kthmore swarm approach the quarantine border. The alien fleet was massive beyond imagination, with bioships the size of cities moving through space like living mountains. They had consumed half the Valdari Empire, and now they were coming for Earth. All ships report ready for combat, announced Captain Maria Santos from her fighter squadron. The quantum disruptors are charged and targeting systems are locked. Ben nodded grimly. This was the moment humanity had prepared for during 40 years of isolation. The Kthmore expected to find primitive humans cowering behind alien defenses. Instead, they would face the most advanced military force the galaxy had ever seen. The first Kthmore scouts reached the quarantine line and immediately began scanning the human defenses. Ben watched their bioships probe the old Valdari platforms and felt a cold satisfaction when they ignored the human vessels completely. They think we're irrelevant, said Chief Engineer Pete Davis from his station. Their scans are focused on the Valdari technology. The Kthmore had learned to counter every weapon and defense system in galactic civilization, but they had never encountered human innovation. For 4 decades, Earth's engineers had developed technology in complete isolation from alien influence. What they had created was utterly unique. War Prime Zektor commanded the Kthmore assault fleet and felt confident as his forces approached the final barrier before the galaxy's core. His swarm had grown powerful by consuming Valdari colonies, and their bioships had adapted to counter every known weapon. The quarantine platforms ahead were outdated Valdari designs that posed no real threat. The primitive human vessels detected nearby were too small to matter. Zektor's scouts reported that the humans used crude kinetic weapons and simple energy shields. Begin the assault, Zektor commanded through the swarm's telepathic network. Consume the platforms and move toward the inner systems. The attack began with 1,000 bioships advancing in perfect formation. They had done this dance 20 times before against Valdari forces and always won the same way. But as they closed range, the human fleet suddenly came alive. Ben Taylor's ships had been running silent with all systems powered down to appear harmless. Now they revealed their true nature as weapons of war designed by a species that understood violence better than any other in the galaxy. "All ships open fire," Ben commanded. The space around the quarantine line erupted in deadly light as human weapons unleashed hell on the Kthmore swarm. Quantum disruptors tore through bioarmor that had turned aside Valdari energy beams. Gravity bombs crushed alien ships from within, while plasma cannons burned through their adaptive hulls. Maria Santos led her fighter squadron in a devastating attack run that caught the enemy completely off guard. Her ships moved with impossible agility using thrust vectoring technology that the Kthmore had never seen. Their bioships tried to adapt, but human tactics changed faster than alien evolution. "Target their command nodes," Maria ordered as her pilots dove through the enemy formation. "Every ship we kill weakens the entire swarm." The Kthmore had always relied on their hive mind to coordinate attacks, but humans turned that strength into a weakness. Pete Davis had designed special weapons that disrupted telepathic communications and isolated bioships from the swarm network. Zektor felt pain for the first time in centuries as human weapons carved through his forces. The bioships were trying to adapt, but these new weapons operated on principles that didn't exist in swarm memory. Every attempt to counter human technology failed because the aliens had no reference point for understanding it. "How are they doing this?" Zektor demanded through the telepathic link, but his subordinates had no answers. The humans fought like no species the swarm had ever encountered. In the first hour of battle, the Kthmore lost 300 ships while destroying only 12 human vessels. It was a ratio that shocked both sides and announced to the galaxy that something fundamental had changed. Acting Counselor Velnara watched the battle from her command ship and felt amazement replace her despair. The humans were not just fighting. The Kthmore, they were winning decisively. Their ships moved with deadly grace and their weapons cut through alien defenses like they were made of paper. "How is this possible?" she asked Commander Luke Harper, who had volunteered to serve as liaison between human and Valdari forces. Luke smiled grimly. 40 years of isolation taught us to think differently. We didn't have access to your technology, so we had to develop our own solutions. What we created is completely outside galactic experience." The battle raged for 6 hours before the Kthmore began to retreat. Zektor had lost over half his fleet and gained nothing in return. The swarm's adaptation abilities were useless against weapons they couldn't understand. "Fall back to the outer rim," Zektor ordered. "We must analyze these new weapons before attempting another assault." But Ben Taylor wasn't finished. Human forces had spent decades planning for this moment, and they weren't going to let the enemy escape to regroup. "All ships pursue," Ben commanded. "We end this here and now." The human fleet broke through the quarantine line for the first time in 40 years and chased the retreating Kthmore into open space. Maria Santos's fighters harried the bioships while Pete Davis's heavy cruisers finished off the wounded. What followed was 3 days of running battle as humans hunted down the scattered Kthmore forces. Luke Harper coordinated with surviving Valdari units to prevent any aliens from escaping back to their consumed colonies. The tide of war had turned completely. Species that had cowered before the Kthmore swarm now watched in amazement as humans systematically destroyed the invaders. The Forbidden People had become the galaxy's saviors. On the 4th day, the last Kthmore bioship was destroyed and silence fell across the battlefield. Ben Taylor stood among the wreckage of the enemy fleet and felt a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. Humanity had proven itself in the most brutal way possible. "Send a message to all Valdari forces," Ben ordered. "The quarantine is officially ended. We're coming to help." Velnara received the message with tears in her eyes. The pride that had nearly destroyed her empire was finally broken. The humans they had imprisoned for 4 decades were offering friendship despite everything that had been done to them. "Prepare a fleet-wide broadcast," she told her communications officer. "It's time the galaxy learned the truth about our human allies." Luke Harper coordinated the joint operations as human and Valdari forces combined for the first time. The cultural differences were massive, but necessity forced them to work together. Humans brought innovation and tactical brilliance while Valdari provided resources and logistic support. The combined fleet moved toward the core systems to begin the liberation of conquered worlds. It would take months to drive the remaining Kthmore forces out of Valdari space, but the outcome was no longer in doubt. Humanity had broken free from their cage and proven that the galaxy's greatest defenders had been hiding behind bars of prejudice and fear. The forbidden species was forbidden no more. President Ellen Murphy stood in the Great Hall of the former Valdari capital and looked out at representatives from 60 different species. 3 years had passed since the end of the Kthmore War, and the galaxy was still adjusting to its new reality. Humanity had gone from quarantined prisoners to the founders of the Galactic Defense Pact. The signing of this treaty marks a new beginning for all our peoples, Ellen announced to the assembled delegates. We have learned that our differences make us stronger when we work together instead of apart. Admiral Chris Johnson watched from the side of the hall and felt proud of how far they had come. His Terran space navy now included ships from dozens of worlds, all using human-designed technology and tactics. The old Valdari Empire had become a willing partner in their former prison. The war's end had brought shocking revelations about the galaxy's true nature. During the liberation of conquered worlds, human forces had discovered evidence that dozens of species had been quarantined by Valdari prejudice over the centuries. The Empire's peace had been built on exclusion rather than cooperation. Ambassador Dan Foster had spent 2 years negotiating with these forgotten peoples, and what he found amazed him. Each quarantined species had developed unique technologies and cultures in isolation. The galaxy was far more diverse than anyone had imagined. The Kthmore invasion was just the beginning, Dan explained during a council meeting. Long-range sensors show 3 more extra-galactic threats approaching. We need every species working together if we're going to survive. Director Nina Walsh led the massive reconstruction effort that was rebuilding the devastated core worlds. Human engineering techniques combined with alien resources had restored most of the damaged colonies in record time. But the project had revealed just how much the Valdari had stagnated during their centuries of dominance. Their infrastructure was impressive but completely static, Nina reported to the Earth government. They hadn't innovated in hundreds of years. No wonder they couldn't adapt to the Kthmore threat. The transformation went beyond just military cooperation. Human traders were opening new markets across the galaxy while human scientists worked with alien researchers to push the boundaries of knowledge. The quarantine had ended, but its effects were still being felt. General Alex Kim commanded the new Galactic Defense Academy, where young beings from every species learned to fight together. The training combined human tactical innovation with alien technological advantages to create something neither could achieve alone. We're not trying to make everyone fight like humans, Alex explained to visiting digrants. We're teaching them to think like humans while using their own natural abilities. Former High Counselor Arnthek had become one of humanity's strongest supporters, despite his early opposition to ending the quarantine. Working with human diplomats had shown him how narrow Valdari thinking had become. We thought diversity was dangerous, Arnthek admitted during a cultural exchange program. But isolation is what nearly destroyed us. The humans saved us from our own prejudices. The political changes were matched by technological breakthroughs that revolutionized galactic civilization. Human quantum computing merged with Valdari energy manipulation to create impossible possibilities. Transportation networks that had taken weeks now required only days. Communication systems allowed instant contact across thousands of light years. Ellen, Murphy's biggest challenge was managing humanity's rapid rise to galactic leadership. Many humans wanted revenge against the Valdari for the decades of imprisonment, but she knew that peace required forgiveness. They were wrong to quarantine us, she told the Earth Congress during a heated debate. But we would be equally wrong to hold grudges when the galaxy needs unity. Chris Johnson faced different problems as more species requested to join the Defense Pact. Each new member brought unique capabilities, but also cultural conflicts that required careful management. The HFY are natural pilots, but they refuse to take orders from non-telepathic beings, Chris reported during a staff meeting. The Mordun have incredible weapons technology, but their honor codes forbid retreat even when tactical withdrawal would save lives. These challenges were solved through patience and creativity rather than force. Human commanders learned to work with alien psychology while alien officers adapted to human flexibility. The result was a military force unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Dan Foster's diplomatic corps handled the delicate task of integrating former enemies into the new order. Many species had fought alongside the Kthmore either willingly or under coercion. Rather than punish them, the Pact offered redemption through service. Everyone deserves a second chance, Dan argued when critics demanded harsh treatment for collaborators. The Valdari quarantined us for 40 years, but we still helped them when they needed it. Nina Walsh's reconstruction projects became symbols of the new cooperation. Human engineers worked alongside Valdari architects and HFY biotechnicians to build colonies that incorporated the best ideas from every culture. The results were more beautiful and functional than anything achieved by a single species. The success brought new challenges as the galaxy's population began to grow rapidly. Peaceful cooperation allowed resources to be used more efficiently, while trade between species created prosperity that lifted billions out of poverty. We're seeing the largest expansion of civilization in galactic history, Nina reported to the Pact Council. Birth rates are up on every member world, and new colonies are being founded every month. But the greatest change was psychological rather than material. Species that had lived in fear for centuries now felt hope for the future. The example of human Valdari cooperation showed that even the deepest prejudices could be overcome. Alex Kim's military academies graduated officers who thought in terms of galactic rather than species loyalty. Young beings who had grown up during the cooperation learned to see diversity as strength rather than threat. My students don't understand why anyone would want to fight based on what species someone belongs to, Alex noted during a conference. To them, cooperation is natural and conflict is wasteful. The vindication came when long-range sensors detected the approach of the next extragalactic threat. The Void Seekers were even more dangerous than the Kthmore, but this time the galaxy was ready. 60 species with combined technologies and coordinated strategies stood prepared to defend their home. Ellen Murphy stood once again in the Great Hall, but now she addressed a unified galaxy rather than fractured empires. The humans who had been forbidden to leave their solar system now led a coalition that spanned millions of worlds. We have learned that our greatest enemy was never any external threat, Ellen announced to the assembled representatives. It was the fear and prejudice that divided us from each other. Today we stand united not because we are the same, but because we celebrate our differences. Chris Johnson's fleets patrolled the galactic rim with ships from every member species, working in perfect coordination. The defensive networks they had built using combined technologies were more powerful than anything previously imagined. The Valdari Empire that had once ruled through fear and isolation was now just one voice among many in a true galactic democracy. Their former subjects had become equal partners while their former prisoners had become their protectors. As Ellen concluded her speech and the treaty was signed by all 60 species representatives, she reflected on the journey that had brought them here. Humanity had been judged too dangerous for civilization, but they had become civilization's greatest defenders. The forbidden space that had once been humanity's prison was now the galaxy's greatest hope. The species that had been caged for their pride had learned humility through isolation and strength through cooperation. The new order they had built together would face many challenges in the years ahead, but it was founded on principles that could survive any threat. Diversity instead of conformity, cooperation instead of domination, hope instead of fear. The galaxy had finally learned what humanity had always known. The greatest victories come not from conquering others, but from standing together against the darkness that threatens them all.